Okay.
Whenever.
Kurt, Rhonda is having problems.
I saw her note on that.
Oh, did you get it too? Okay, good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she appears to be on a telephone right now.
Okay. There
Huh.
she is.
Oh, there she
She
Solved
is
your problem.
on cue.
My
Rhonda,
husband came home from work.
I've been waiting for you,
I
Rhonda,
think
since
I
8
might
o'clock.
be good.
Yeah, looks fine to me.
We'll see how long I last. Thank you all.
Sure, there's no TV show or a movie.
Kurt, did you hear me say that you're live?
No, I did not. So we're live. Welcome to the 20th September 2021 meeting of the Annapolis Transportation Board. We have a quorum, and Elvia is here audibly, if not visually. And Elvia, are you prepared to do this task for us tonight?
Yes, I'm taking notes.
Okay, good. The roll call is simple and visual, and Elvia will note those who are present. The first item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. Motion to approve.
So moved. Okay.
Okay, and vote. All in favor, say aye. That seems to be
Aye.
a majority. The next item is approval of the last month's November minutes, which were distributed to all of you. Thank you, Tom, for taking them for us. And so I'll take a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
And all in favor? Thank you. We have it. There is no public participation noted.
I hope you continue to enjoy it. I'm gonna let you go. I'm gonna take a little bit of a nap.
We
I
have,
think you need to mute, Tom.
Yeah,
Sure.
I'm gonna get from my mom's house, so you can come back now.
Yeah. Okay. No public participation, so we move quickly then to reports from committees, of which we have two at the moment. And I'm going to just switch the order to do bicycles first. The only thing I have to tell you on bicycles is that we had two meetings during the past 10 days or so with Delegate Dana Jones and Senator Sarah Elfreth on this issue of bicycles on sidewalks, where we recommended to the city council and to the county, and the city recommended to the state that the default setting in the Maryland state law be switched from forbidden unless allowed to allowed unless forbidden. Both Sarah Elfreth and Dana Jones are very favorable to that. They will carry our water for us. Dana Jones is working on a bill to switch that default. Sarah is full. It turns out that every member of the Senate has a limit of 25 articles of legislation that they are permitted to introduce. She's at her limit, and so we're going to arrange for somebody else to carry our water on that. I have no idea how it will be received by delegates from other counties and cities in Maryland, but we appear to be off and running. And that's all I have to report on that issue. Now, I'd like to move to fare free transit, the big topic for tonight's discussion. I'm going to, each of you have received, every member of the board has received the white paper that we developed, which outline our findings and recommendations to the city, which I hope you've all had a chance to look at. I did not distribute it outside the members of the committee, and I guess to Kwaku as well. Kwaku was very helpful to us in reviewing our preliminary findings and correcting some data errors that we had, and some educating us as to the meanings of some of the terms that we were using. And I think because of his input, the paper is a lot stronger than it was before. I think the most efficient way of doing this is just to plunge into a PowerPoint that we have on the subject. And if I can start it, that's what I'm going to do right now. Here we go. And I have to share screen. I hope I'm able to do that. Indeed, I am. Can everybody see that?
Yes,
All right.
I can.
So this is a summary, a succinct summary of everything that is in the position paper that we have developed for the board at large. And this will give you a flavor, very short flavor of what we covered and what we recommend. To remind everybody, especially the new people here, that the members of the Annapolis Transportation Board are listed here on the left. Beth Dolezal, me, Tom Schock, Elvia Thompson, Charles Brooks, Kara Fleck-Plewinski, David DeQuinzio, Carol Kelly, Vince Harriman, John Purnell, our newest member, Tara Ashmore, and Zoe Johnson. In this effort, we formed a little subcommittee of 3 people, which consisted of me and Beth and John. And my hat is off to Beth and John for having really gotten into this. I was afraid initially that I might be the only enthusiast, but I can tell you these 2 have gotten into it, become clear enthusiasts themselves, and did a lot of the work that I will be starting talking about tonight. And the 2 of them will be chiming in at appropriate places as we go through the presentation. Okay, let's start with the big picture. We on the Transportation Board are interested in improving transportation overall for Annapolis. And we characterize that as a diverse system, which has not only cars, not only transit, but other things like ease and safety for bicycles, pedestrians, and so forth. Good system is resilient and stable against disruptions, clogging from congestion, disruptions from accidents, as on Forest Drive. It's accessible. Everybody should be able to use the elements of our total transportation system that are most convenient to that person. And then equity. Not everybody has equal access by reasons of income or race or where they happen to be located in the city or infirmities brought on by age and so forth. So a really well-performing system is characterized by good flow in all modes, easy switching between the modes so that if there's a problem on one mode, you can switch to another, which will serve your transportation needs, at least temporarily. And we want short wait times for all modes. We want speedy travel. We want system-wide coordination. That means good data, so that if you're waiting for a bus, you'll know where it is, how long it's going to get to you, where it's going. Many of these things are not easily available to people who use the system now. So moving from the overall transportation objectives that I think we all share, let's zero in on transit, which is our subject for tonight. Our goals generally, qualitatively, are to improve transit by increasing accessibility, more routes, different types of vehicles. There's been a lot of talk about electric vehicles, and the first ones are starting to appear. Improve equity and end barriers of access to the transit system that afflict people who have low incomes, racial disparities, age, locations that may not be well served now and need to be served better in the future. A characteristic of too many bus systems, and this includes our own, is that ridership is not up to a level that we would like it to be. There are too many empty buses that run around, and we would like to fill those buses up with people who choose transit rather than driving for lots and lots of reasons. A good transit system can better connect people to jobs, shopping, medical services, especially those people who are at the low income end of the scale and may not have alternatives to public transit. As in the prior slide, we want short wait times, speedy travel, wide geographical coverage, easy connections between modes, good information systems from apps on your cell phone and other ways of communicating. A good transit system builds community pride. One of the things that we noticed as we looked into the case studies of transit systems around the country was those that have good transit systems really trumpet it. It becomes a feature that attracts people to the town, attracts business to the town, vacationers and so forth. So it's something that can bring and has brought a sense of community pride to other systems that have done it. And frequently those good systems have chosen to adopt fare-free transit. A transit goal that we have is stable and adequate funding for what it is we want to do to have an excellent system. And one of the goals, of course, is good environmental performance, which is to minimize emissions, mostly from cars, by displacing car travel to other modes, and eventually a wider implementation of electric vehicles too. And then finally, on this disruptions thing, it's not only car crashes on Forest Drive and tornadoes. We have a self-generated disruption coming with the replacement of the Hillman Garage and the redo of City Dock. That is going to present some transportation challenges. And we think that fare-free transit can contribute usefully to making things better, getting through that transition. Okay, I'm going to go to the bottom line up front. These are the recommendations of the board, provided we vote for them tonight. The subcommittee recommends that the board endorse the following recommendations to the city of Annapolis. One, let's adopt fare-free transit. Two, the City Dock and Hillman Garage projects create a need and an opportunity for a transition to fare-free transit. It'll help not only get through this little bump in the road that we're about to face, it will serve the long-term vitality of Annapolis. Three, it costs some money. The fare box does produce some revenue, which is a contributor to the overall operations of the transit system, but it's small. And we think that small loss of fare revenue can fairly easily be replaced from other sources. And I'll get to the numbers later in the presentation. We have a suggested menu of potential options, and we're going to suggest those options as just that. There are things that require essentially political decisions, and it's up to the city to choose which of those work for the city and which don't. But we do recommend that they do choose enough options to make up that very small difference, which will be lost by fares. And then finally, we recommend, after having gone through an unpleasant bump in the road with the circulator, that the city not try to find missing funds by decreasing service. If you'll recall, the circulator ran free when it was inaugurated. And for reasons that I still don't understand, the city council decided to institute a fare, at which point ridership dropped. And a year later, they made it free again. So it's now a robust and I think very successful part of the Annapolis transit system. Okay. This is just a quick look at the current transit system. 7 routes plus the circulator. There is on-demand paratransit and a state shuttle, which moves state employees from, I guess, the Naval Stadium to state offices downtown. That's the complete system, and with ridership numbers on the slide here. Revenues look like this. You can't read some of the numbers. We haven't fixed this slide, but we will. The dark blue slices of the pie are contributions from the, gosh, what is that?
Well, how did that go away? I'm curious about that one as well.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a
Oh,
transfer from
I
the
see what
parking front.
it's in black writing on the dark blue thing. It's transfer
yeah.
from parking front.
The
There you go.
contrast is a little low. That is revenue from parking services, which was transferred to transit. And then the lighter blue is county grants. But this is the distribution of all of the funding that comes rolling into the into transit operations. And the thing that I want to point out to you is the slice of this pie, this blue pie here, and this little red sliver. These two slivers of the big pie are all of the revenues that we get by collecting fares. It's a very small percentage. It turns out to be 6.9%, these two slices added together. Only 6.9% of the total cost of operating the transit system comes from collecting fares. And so the obvious
Kurt,
question—
let me clarify that statement. 6% of the total ADOT revenue comes from that. It's a slightly higher number. It's about 7.5% of the transit revenue, which excludes some of those things that Kwaku brought up about TNCs, taxis, other sources of income that are in the ADOT world. So I just want to make sure you're speaking the correct truth.
Indeed, you are exactly right, and I thank you for that. Numbers aside, the takeaway point is that this is a small percentage of the total.
Right.
There was a
Yeah, John and Kurt, what is a TNC?
A TNC is a transportation network company.
Uber.
Uber, Lyft, those are transportation network companies. What's happened over the last dozen years since the introduction of Uber is that our revenue, which came from taxis operating in the city, has transferred almost 80% to revenues we get from Uber and Lyft for operating the city.
Okay, and I'm sorry, that was in the report. I should have seen that. But I do.
Elva, it's a great question. I'm so glad you asked it.
Another question is, the slice in between advertising and federal grants, that blue, what is that?
That's federal grants. I apologize for that. Something happened with Excel in the middle of there. So we get money from the federal, which is the light blue, the state, which is the green, and then the county, which is at the 6 o'clock position, that other blue wedge that I can't seem to make come out of there anymore. So yeah, in a last minute Excel move, it decided to move everything back inside where I couldn't read it.
We will.
Did that answer your question, Avaya? So the right past advertising is federal grants, the green is state grants, and the blue that's at the bottom is county grants.
And also, you've got a typo at fair income, as long as you're fixing stuff on this slide.
Oh, sure do.
Yes,
thank you.
Indeed. Yeah.
I wonder where that mistake got made.
I didn't want to bring it up. I've been hitting you too much, so I left that one.
Oh, you should have brought it up, apparently.
You can't,
all right, that's fixed.
You can't have too many proofreaders.
That's right.
Part of our work consisted of talking to people running lots of other transit systems. We had one appearance at our last month's meeting by the assistant city manager and the director for the entire state of Utah transportation system, discussing a very successful implementation of fare-free transit in Park City. It's a city which is somewhat smaller than Annapolis, but it swells during ski season and other peak periods to be larger than Annapolis, much larger. And they gave a very interesting presentation, very useful numbers and advice on how we could get there. Missoula, Kansas City, Corvallis, New Hampshire, Vermont, Olympia, Whidbey Island in Washington, and Alexandria. Alexandria system is now fare-free. So we harvested what information and wisdom we could from their experience. some of which appears at the end of the paper that you all have. Here are some problems that we'd like to solve. We think the transit can play a much stronger role in making the overall system much more resilient and diverse. The cost per ride is high in Annapolis. If you just take the total cost and divide it by the number of trips that are made, it turns out to be high. We don't have enough people using the bus, and we would like to find ways of encouraging them to do it. Making the fare zero is one of those ways, and it's turned out to be very successful elsewhere. Wait times for the next bus are too long. This is another factor which discourages people from selecting transit as their mode of transportation. Some of the ordinances and funding don't connect very well with what we want to do, and we're looking forward to working with the council to identify those and give our advice on how to change them. Fares definitely discourage ridership. It's been found in systems around the country that when the fare goes away, the ridership goes up strikingly. We have adopted a growth of 25%, but I must stress that's a very conservative thing. The average is closer to double that after a couple of years, and we would expect that the community would respond and start selecting buses as their mode of transportation more frequently than they do now. It costs money to collect fares. You've got equipment, you got to operate them, you've got to maintain them, you've got to keep custody of the money, do accounting for it, and repair the equipment when it goes bad. So you don't get to keep all of the money that you collect from fares. It costs some just to collect it itself. The process of collecting money on a bus slows the boarding. And there are estimates that John has done for how much that slowing occurs and how much we might speed up routes, expand them, add more stops when that boarding process is shortened by reducing the necessity of collecting a fare. And then finally, fare collection, as reported around the country, is the most frequent source of conflict on a bus between riders and the driver, and sometimes between riders themselves. So the free fare concept is very, very simple. It should look to riders as though it's free. It's not free, and we're going to have to find ways of paying for it. But it should look to riders as though it's free, and nobody should have to consider cost before just hopping on the bus. Annapolis would remove fare boxes, cancel cash pickups, eliminate tickets, passes, vouchers. There's some office work that is involved in checking eligibility for the various classes of passes. No more cash handling, no more accounting, security. And transfers between routes would be just as simple as another free ride. You don't need to prove that you were on a prior ride. This, we think, would dovetail very nicely with the Hillman Garage renovation. And we want to stress that it's kind of here already a little bit. The camel's nose is in the tent. And so we've made some tentative steps in this direction. The state employee shuttle is free to state employees, although the state is paying for it. It's not free to everybody else, but it is free to a segment of the population. The Anne Arundel County transit system was temporarily made free, and that was really stimulated by the COVID episode. And I don't know what the probabilities are for their keeping it free or having to revert to a fare-free system, but they did that, so they were ahead of us on that. The Annapolis Circulator is free. It's a kind of a short route. It started fare-free, but then in its wisdom, the city council thought it was smart to collect a little money realized fairly quickly that that was not the way to go and then eliminated the fare again. It's popular. A lot of people use it. It's agile. You can board and deboard at places other than marked stops. The experience is good and lots of people would like to see it extended. Okay, here's a digest of some facts that we gleaned that I think should inform your thinking on it. As we have stressed many times before, fares pay only a small percentage of the transit revenue. It's about 7.6%. That's the current correct number, right, John?
Yeah, that's of just the transit revenue. That
Of
took
the
out
transit.
all the other non-transit revenue sources, Quacos, to make sure
Yeah,
that we were speaking specifically to what we have for transit.
that's right. We had a lower number there before, but that we had to make a correction. And thank you, Kwaku, for providing that input. But it's a small number, and that's the takeaway. If you take the cost that we do have to pay for, if we were to, I'm sorry, if you take the total expenditures and divide it by the number of people who take rides, turns out to be a little over $13 per ride. So every body that you see on a bus is costing $13. Only 90 cents of which is contributed by the fare that they pay. Fare collection costs and equipment and so forth are a factor. We get a total of around $5 million from non-fare sources and only $300,000 from fares. So $300,000 is a small piece of $5 million. And the question is, well, let's bite the bullet, pay it, and get more people on the buses. The cost to residents of paying that $300 million would be $7.64 per person per year. If citizens of Annapolis were willing to fork over $7.64 per year, everybody in the city could ride free all year long. There is a national trend toward fare-free transit. It's well established. Over 100 cities have done it, and the trend seems to be accelerating. There are some equity considerations that we think are important. And in our view, the city is kind of upside down on some of them. We are giving substantial value, transportation value, with parking giveaways. Giveaways that go mainly to affluent segments of the population. Parking is free to city residents who own one or more cars, but we demand that people often at the low end of the income spectrum pay to ride transit. That seems a little upside down to us, and we think there's an equity issue there that could be addressed partly by simply making fares free for transit riders. Parking is provided free to city workers, most of whom are fairly affluent, and for organizers and attendees at special events. We've looked at the numbers, and residential street parking fees appear to be fairly strongly subsidized relative to options in the private market. All of these things are benefits that seem to fall more favorably on people who are affluent and have money and could afford to pay them than the poor people who sometimes have no other option than to ride transit. Fare-free transit would have the benefit of expanding access for employment to low-wage workers. They could go to job interviews more readily, those that are more distant from where they happen to live. It's a benefit to employers because the more people you have you are drawing as prospective employees, the better your selection can be. The easier it will be to fill vacancies. And then finally, fare-free transit, we think, gives essential support to seniors, people who can no longer drive, may have low incomes, and have frequent needs for medical and shopping visits that they can't manage on their own without some kind of help. And for many of them, transit is an option. Environmental benefits are significant. If we get the very conservative low estimate of a 25% increase in ridership as a result of implementing free fare, we move people out of cars, relieves automobile congestion, saves a lot of trips, the numbers are here, a lot of miles, that number, a lot of fuel, that number, and a lot of money. The green benefit is 175 tons of CO2 not emitted each year. And we reduce emissions causing air pollution like nitrogen oxides, hydrocarbons, particulates. And to the extent that we can reduce the need for cars, we reduce the need for car infrastructure. That infrastructure is streets, parking lots, garage roofs, all of which are impervious surfaces that generate stormwater and cause water quality problems. There's a whole list of additional benefits of fare-free transit. As I said, community bonding and pride is one of the things that you get out of this. You get improved overall system diversity and resiliency, performing better in emergencies, accidents. Ridership goes up. We think it is possible, based on our discussions with transit systems around the country, that grant revenues may be partially tied to ridership, even if they are not clearly tied in a lockstep fashion. It seems clear, and the operators of other systems believe, that ridership increases stimulated by fare free are useful in applying for and getting grant revenue. Better performance with less time for loading buses, decreases in congestion of cars. John, you want to say something about this cost per ride declining?
Yeah, I mean, we said earlier that our cost per ride is, if you take all of the riders and divide out all the costs, you end up with everybody that steps on a bus is a $13 expense. The increased ridership, that's really the driving factor, would cause that to drop to $10.75 in a free fare environment.
What, based on what numbers?
Strictly increases in ridership. It's a 25% increase in ridership. Honestly, Carol, we've talked to some of the other free fare cities, and their numbers go as high as 75%. We picked intentionally a very conservative number. Nobody experienced lower than 25%. So we're taking the very most conservative approach to the model here.
Very convincing.
And then finally, City Dock Hillman Garage, we think benefit from this, as I said before. Why don't you go into some modeling? We looked into the future to see what would happen. If this were implemented, what kind of a shock would it be to the city? John?
I think the answer is no shock at all. I think it'll hardly be noticed. There is a loss of revenue that comes from this, and primarily we're comparing fiscal years 20. Well, there's two 23s. There's another typo. The last two should be fiscal 25 and 26. We're comparing those to 18 and 19. We left 20 and 21 out because they really are so disrupted by COVID that the numbers just weren't workable for us. So we used 18 and 19 as our base case, and we compared it to the last two, which are 25 and 26. And I think you can look at this chart, and the bottom line of this chart is not much changes. And we have slight variations in the net income. It's a little negative, but it's not hugely negative given the social and sustainability benefits that we get from it. That's the report.
Okay.
Kurt?
All right. Although it is small, there is some money that is produced by fares that will have to be supplemented from other sources. We're not going to make any strong recommendations about which of these options should be chosen, but I'm going to list here a whole bunch of possible sources of funds to make up that very small deficit. First of all, work with the state to not only preserve but enlarge the funding that we already get from the state. We get a contribution from Anne Arundel County. Let's negotiate with them and see if we can't make that a little bit larger. Other cities have arranged to have major employers essentially subscribe to the transit system by making annual contributions. Still, other cities have made the transit system a cost item that is negotiated during the permit negotiation process. That if somebody's going to put in a development that generates new transportation demand, that funding can be provided under that agreement to the authority on an ongoing basis. We recommend that efforts to apply for grants be enhanced. Many other places do rely on, at least partially, on a sales tax increment. That's not something that Annapolis can do without permission of the legislature. But I think this kind of thing has been done in other localities around the state of Maryland. And if we could secure a legislative authority to do that, that's something that Annapolis could do. Increase the commitment of parking revenues, some of which are already provided to the transit operation, and just increase that some. Eliminate or reduce free parking. Free parking provided to city employees, city residents, and participants in special events. That's a significant figure. We've had trouble in running it down, but we think it's a substantial chunk of the deficit that we're talking about. It's a big chunk of $300,000.
And I'd like to just say one thing, that
Mhm.
It could be a combination of any of these things. It isn't just one. It
No,
can be a bit and piece of combination of any of these things.
Indeed, this is a menu of options to select from. And some of them will be rejected as non-starters, but 2, 3, 4 of them might be very practical. Here are some more of the options. Increase parking fees, or make pay parking more widely distributed than it is right now. Increase contributions from the city's general fund. The city could go into business providing transit services to schools, special events and so forth, collecting some revenue for that purpose. Financial benefits might accrue from coordinating better with the county transit. Don't have clear ideas on what that might be, but regionalization is something that people always talk about. And if there are efficiencies to be found, we should find them and exploit them. We get some revenue now from advertising. Could that be expanded? I don't know. And then finally, donations. This may be a low probability, but we found transit systems that do actually get donations. And so wrapping up, this is a re-showing of the slide we showed you before. We recommend that the city do fare free transit, that it use Hillman Garage as a not only an event that causes, well, it creates a need and an opportunity for us to move in this direction. It would provide benefits not only for that transition period, but for the long term. That the city choose from that menu of options to cover the shortfall from no longer collecting $300,000 a year in revenue. And then finally, that whatever the city does, it shouldn't decrease the transit services that are provided. So that's it. Beth, you haven't said much. Would you like to add something?
No, I'm the one who did most of the interviewing with all the cities around the country. And really and truly, what Kurt said is true. The cities that moved over to the fare free, and in some cases just couldn't believe how well it went and how much increase in their ridership they had, and such and so on. Some were actually never paid. Some were always fare free. And again, paid for by companies that wanted to get their employees from point A to point B without too much of a problem, and also to draw high quality employees. Good transportation is really important for high quality employees, and some of them wanted it for that. And also retirees, one of the big things retirees look at is good transportation systems, and transportation systems that are easy to handle and easy to do. So, you know, there's a lot of benefits to having a fare free. And as Kurt said, many cities are looking at this and really working at moving in that direction. It was amazing once I started talking to people, just what was out there, and just how many people are thinking about it. So and it just seems like to me that it's almost like, why wouldn't we? I mean, I don't know. It's like a why wouldn't we, you know? So
Okay.
that's my comments, I guess.
John, and then we'll throw it open for general discussion.
Thanks, Kurt. I would add two things, and maybe they're repeats, but the first is, I think the timing here is something the council needs to really carefully consider. There is an opportunity here, I think, to make substantial political gain by offering free fare during the Hillman garage renovation. Don't drive into town, there's no parking, but we're gonna make getting to town free. And I think there's a big Benny here for the council and the mayor to jump on this and make this happen by early in January, if that's possible. The second thing I'll just say is I did actually just come from a cocktail party here for this meeting, and I was explaining what we were doing. And one of the people jumped up and said they did this in Portland, and they are so proud of it. And it really is a source of, you know, we're thinking outside the fare box, literally. So I think that Annapolis could get a lot of gain out of this. And I think, frankly, I'm the guy that's run all the financials. I've been dealing with these numbers for 4 months. The numbers don't matter. They are essentially a nit in the picture here. The picture here is, can we offer a transit service that is available to every citizen, does the right thing at the right time, and is free and easy to use to get you to all the places that employers and retailers want you to be. That's my bit, Kurt.
Okay, I'd like to say one other thing, and I thought about it before, decided I wouldn't, but now John's kind of brought it up. So a free fare system really, to me, is equitable to the whole population. And it's really, here we are in a time when employers are having a terrible time getting employees, especially in the service industry where people aren't paid as much, and you know, all that kind of stuff. People are reevaluating, do they really want to work at something? And fare free helps people that need the help. They're the ones who don't have the money to pay the fare, and they are the ones that really need to get the kind of like promote social equity, and also helps for barriers of employment, as actually Kurt mentioned in the presentation as well. And I think those are those are long-term. I think the Hillman Garage is important because it's happening right now and it's something we can jump on and really work with. But in the long term, I think it's more the racial equity and the barriers to employment that are so important, and for our senior citizens that can't get around as easy and things like that.
Great, thanks very much. Is there more discussion among members and our visitors? Ellie?
Yes. I might have missed it, and excuse me if I did.
Rhonda?
I'm sorry. Okay.
Yes.
Excuse me if I missed it. Did we do any kind of surveys or with residents or businesses as to how they felt about this? Maybe nothing formalized, but even if it's anecdotal.
To my knowledge, nothing in the city of Annapolis has been. Kara actually looked at this to some extent, and you may have some wisdom you can share.
It was my understanding through the process with the comprehensive plan that surveying had been done already of Annapolis city residents, but the data for that survey, it's been a while since I've looked. I don't think fare free transit was addressed specifically in that survey though.
Okay, thank you. But this sounds wonderful. I mean, the presentation is wonderful and I think it's a great idea. So thank you all so much for all your hard work.
Thank you indeed. Ellie?
Oh, thank you. First, just a little housekeeping here. You may have heard that I'm not going to be chairing the Transportation Committee, but I wanted to attend this meeting. And also my colleague, Alderwoman O'Neill, is on the call. She'll be the Transportation Committee Chair. So I just wanted to make that introduction. I do want to say a couple of things as quickly as I can. First, you know that I'm a strong supporter of this. I wanted to do at least a pilot. I was so enthusiastic about it at the last budget, and that translated into sort of an on-call system. But this is where I hit a wall. I know that we wanted to get you in to talk to the mayor about this and or the city manager. John Purnell had asked me to set up a meeting and present your white paper. The conundrum is dovetailing, for lack of a better word, into the Hillman project. And I don't go to those meetings. I do know this. I do know that there is a mobility plan for Hillman, which involves enhancing the current circulator to 10 minutes, introducing 2 new shuttles, and then using an on-call system. I see that sort of as independent of transit, but I don't know if the administration does. I just want to be honest that that's where I hit the roadblock is, well, now I'm not putting words in their mouths, but it's like, well, now's not the time because we really have to think about how we're going to make Hillman work. And it doesn't seem to be part of the conversation. So that was a long way of saying that I was unsuccessful in having a meeting with the mayor to present this. And that's the challenge that we have right now. I don't know if the acting director of transportation, Kwaku, could enlighten us a little bit about what that roadblock is, or that, sort of the blinders on and just keeping Hillman and the whole mobility plan for Hillman separate from transit.
Yeah, indeed. And just before Kwaku speaks, if he chooses to, I hope that we could convert the city to thinking of these 2 options not as antagonistic or mutually exclusive, but synergistic. They can work hand in hand together.
Yeah, exactly. And I think I think it was Beth that said, let's look at the long term of this. Let's maybe not focus so much on Hillman, but let's look at the long term. And I mean, the thing that, and I'm passionate about this because taking a bus is not the cool thing to do in Annapolis. So that has to change. And this is the only way I see it happening. It's just get people on those buses.
It's very cool.
And believe it or not,
you're
I take it all
right.
the time. I think it's really cool. So I disagree with
you know
that.
what I mean? The
I
optics.
do, and I've been in places
I
where
know,
it is
and
the
that's
cool
my
thing to do.
frustration. Yeah, exactly. So Yeah, so I would like to hear from Kwaku if he'd like to talk about what that, the blinders are there on the Hillman versus Transit.
Yeah,
opportunity.
sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes.
Okay, sure. You're right. There is a mobility plan for the Hillman parking garage. My understanding when it did start was solely during the construction of the Hillman parking garage, and that is it. From the mayor's point of view, there are three components of that mobility plan. As you said earlier, is an enhanced circulator where we will, Annapolis Transit will add additional bars to shorten the wait times. Another component is the micro transit where I think VIA is the subcontractor for the major contractor for the Hillman parking garage. Well, I think in its initial proposal will use 3 minivans of 6 passenger capacity each. And then they will use the micro transit software where people can download that kind of app on their phones to request and make trips. The advantage of that compared to the traditional calling for ride is that the driver can receive it and then can communicate with you back and forth, even to the point where it will tell you that, okay, you are about 1 minute or 2 minutes to the point where you did indicate you'll be standing there. So that is there. Okay. What I know is that more likely 2 components of the mobility plan for Hillman parking garage may outlive the construction time of the garage, i.e. the enhanced circulator. Our idea in the department is to get money to buy electric buses to put them on the circulator, which should be free for that. And also the mayor has this idea of a 10-minute trolley in the downtown area where the idea is to use smaller vehicles kind of within the inner downtown area, just going around and then picking up people so you don't have to wait. The micro transit, as I know of, I don't think will go beyond the construction of the Hillman parking garage. However, as Alderwoman Tyranny knows, because of your hard work, we do have money to do a pilot project. I will let you know that initially you wanted to use VIA, which is the subcontractor for the mobility plan for the Hillman parking garage. We did get cost proposals. They were very, very expensive. And because of that, in discussion with the procurement office, we decided to do competitive bidding. So that is underway. So if after the Hillman parking garage, there is any micro transit services in the city, it is because of what Alderwoman Ali did, and we plan to do it for 12 months. So we have the proposal sent to the procurement office to basically send it out for bid. So what I know is this, in summary, 2 components of the mobility plan, I believe, will carry on, particularly the enhanced circulator service. We may want to look at whether it is better for the city to run or to subcontract it as it is right now. The second component is one of the mayor's key projects in terms of this 10 minutes shuttle within the downtown area. And for the VIA micro transit package, so far as I know at this point, I don't believe that it will go beyond the completion of the Hillman parking garage.
Okay, thank you, Kwaku.
Sure.
I know little of the details of these proposals, but I do suggest that you on the city council should look at the numbers. This fare free, the money we're talking about to implement fare free is, I think, tiny. It's of the order of $300,000. And I just ask you to keep that number in mind as you start to cost what these other short-term things are. If there's a way of doing them both in a useful synergistic way, I think we should seize the opportunity. Now we have hands up. Dave DeQuincio, did you want to get in here?
Yes, thanks very much, Kurt. Could you please share your screen again and go back to the beginning of the slide deck?
Sure.
So while you're doing that, I'll say that when I first heard this concept, I was skeptical, but I have warmed up to it. I now, and I really appreciate the homework that Beth and John and Kurt that you all did on this. And I think that the slides look pretty impressive. I just want to go to the beginning.
Okay, where?
Okay, right here, transportation goals.
Uh-huh.
I would recommend adding a bullet under excellent performance characterized by, and that bullet would say, clear, consistent, and transparent financial analysis and reporting.
Uh-huh. Good suggestion.
And the reason for that is I think we ought to be playing up that this is the fiscally responsible thing to do.
Okay.
If you go to the next slide. Okay, I think I'm good with this. And I want to explain why. That I think we should really be playing up the fiscal point of this. I don't think that we as a board do the elected officials who appointed us and our fellow citizens at large a complete service if we put on blinders toward the politics of it, if we put our heads in the sands with regard to politics. Transportation has an undeniable political angle to it. And I don't think there's any getting around that. So, and also, it's taken me almost 60 years to learn, but over the years, I've gotten better at advocating for certain things by taking time to pretend I'm somebody else coming in from a different perspective, and how would I attack this if I wanted to attack it? The black swan is always out there somewhere. He may not be at your doorstep today, but things come out of left field and torpedo good ideas all the time. And I've had that happen. So I'd like to talk a little bit about what I see as possible attack lines on this. And I think it's important for the elected officials who are on the call with us to at least hear this and be prepared, right? Just like they say in the Boy Scouts and the Girl Scouts too, be prepared. These kinds of attacks may not happen, but it's good to be ready if they do. The political environment, I think that this could be subjected to, it goes like this. We just have come out of an election season in which here locally, the Republican Party was shut out completely. I don't recall, I moved here in '98. I'm not sure, I think this may be the first time that an all Democrat mayor and council has been in office. Maybe it's happened before, but I don't recall. So if I'm a local Republican person and smarting over being shut out, and I'm trying to think about, what's the path back for us to have at least a council seat or two and maybe the mayor's office in the future, I'm going to be looking for things to throw stones at. I'm going to be looking for something that I can use as a toehold to maybe pull some people my way. This could be something that they seize upon. And in today's political environment, having your facts straight and doing your homework don't seem to count for much. So a good defense against what they might throw at it is, hey, this is the fiscally smart thing to do. You hinted at it, but I think it could be borne out further. I think the numbers show from the research I've been able to do that we are never more subsidized as Americans as we are behind the wheels of our automobiles. And the reason most of us as Americans don't think of it that way is that we've been fed distortions and things, and we end up with sloppy language and sloppy accounting. So many of us are unaware of just how heavily subsidized we are behind the wheel. And so anyway, if you may think that I'm seeing a ghost here and this might not be a real thing, but I do want to relay something that might put it in focus. I don't recall the exact year, but in prior years, I want to say the 2010, 2011 timeframe, one of the two District 30 state delegates was none other than Herb McMillan, who's running for county council. And he used to send out a quarterly newsletter. And one of the newsletters he sent out, he devoted almost the entire newsletter to attacking transit. And I read his attack and I immediately recognized it as not anything he personally wrote, or he may have edited a little bit of it, but it mostly came from either the Heritage Foundation or Cato Institute or whatever, the usual suspects in terms of transit opposition. And it was full of the same non sequiturs and tautologies and circular reasoning and reducto ad absurdum and all the usual rhetorical tricks and things that they use. And some people find it convincing. So that's why I say we should be playing up the fiscal responsibility part of this. And I would say this to Ellie, Rhonda, and Karma. I'm willing to help, prepare talking points and things about how to be ready for the attacks when they come, if they come. And others on the board probably can contribute to that. But I would like to hear some indication from you as whether you think that's important or not, or if you disagree with me that this is not like, or if you believe that this is not likely to be seized upon as a political football. I just like to be prepared.
Dave, did you have specific, I know you said to play up the fiscal responsibility of this, but are you comfortable getting specific about the sorts of attacks that you think we could expect to hear about this?
Yeah, they're unpleasant. They're unpleasant to talk about. They'll, what you'll hear is things like, there they go again, pouring money down a rat hole, funding the loser cruiser. This is the rhetoric I have heard. I hate to even say it, but this is what's out there. And
Zoe, you have your hand up. Would you like to?
Yeah, I just want to start by thanking John and Kurt and Beth for doing all the research you've done. And I think we've heard a couple presentations in your report outs on the last couple of meetings, and you're farther ahead in some of your understanding than we are. So forgive me. I know that these two questions one was answered by the representative from Park City that I have, and the second was actually a question. My second question was something we brought up very early on. I just want you to remind me what the answer was. So, but I think one of them goes to the fiscal responsibility, help answer that question, because it's a question I had, is that on your pie chart, there is a slice, while it's not a huge slice, about state and federal grants. And just my concern, or that a concern that can be brought up, is that over time, there's not 100% reliability of those grants. They can, fluctuate with state and federal, budgets. So I think the answer in Park City was they were able to sort of have contingency funding and start over time to shift to other sources of funding to overcome that risk, or vulnerability associated with the loss if there was an unforeseen loss of those grants. But I just think when we look at that pie chart and look at which funding streams are not, could have some potential volatility, I think we need to be prepared to sort of answer how from a fiscal perspective we can continue to maintain free transit while understanding there may need to be some shifts in that funding.
That's a good caution. Yes.
Yeah, so that's just one comment. And the second is a question. When we were researching this early on and starting the conversations, was there a concern or there was a question about the legality or the ethics of the contributions of in the case of the state shuttle? Could they contribute, since they were doing that for their state employees, could they contribute to free transit for all? Or were there several of those funding streams that had to be cut off because of that? Wasn't that a question we had early on?
I believe what it is that we might have to change the wording so that it could continue, but we would negotiate with the state and work at that. But the wording, we're hoping the state would not withdraw because we would still be moving their people, but that we would change it to some sort of a grant or something like that rather than what it is now.
It's possible that agreements and contracts would have to be modified, but
yeah,
our
John has a lot.
recommendations-
Excuse me, John had a lot.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to say John had a lot to say about what he thought it could change to.
Well, what I had said was that we have an arrangement with the state to provide this special service from the Naval Academy to the state office buildings. It is generally not part of our regular bus service. It is part of Kwaku's financials, but it operates almost like a charter. So two thoughts on that. One is I think we should characterize it in a different way, and that's what I think Beth and Kurt are saying, that we can discuss with the state retaining the $225,000 a year of revenue that comes from providing that service. And if for some reason they decide, because of COVID, because of whatever reason, they don't want it anymore, we would actually have a reduction in costs that would go along with it, because that's drivers and vehicles that would no longer be needed. So I'm not perceiving this to be a roadblock to free fare or to fare free, but it is something we've got to work out with the state. And I think that would be, once the council feels comfortable with it, one of our next steps.
Thanks. Carol, did you have a hand up?
Well, Zoe had more, I think. I'm not sure. Oh, maybe not.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think just in terms of how we're characterizing that pie chart and sort of steps is that there are, contingencies and, paths to work through to ensure that we're maintaining that funding in the long term to support the program. That we're not going into this assuming it's, the fiscal balances will be set, indefinitely, that there will be some work to do and some contingency planning, on the financial end.
Indeed.
I think your statement that the grant funding is not guaranteed is very true. However, Beth, remind me that in all of our case study research, they all reported getting increased grant revenue related to increased ridership.
Yes.
Now, I will tell you bluntly that Kwaku is not bought into this concept. We've had a lot of conversations about whether that would or wouldn't happen. So we've been very conservative in terms of assuming any growth in our grant revenue in this model.
Yeah. Yes. Every one of them said that by increasing the ridership, that increased their grants. Mm-hmm. And they didn't have any problems with getting their grants. And some of these fare free have gone on for 30 years and they have not had a problem. Where they have had a problem a little bit, some of them, is where businesses, not big businesses, but like the stores downtown, commercial businesses like that, where they were submitting after a few years, even though the service was very beneficial and actually beneficial to their businesses, they did feel that they wanted to back out of being some of that money. And so those particular transit systems found other revenue streams, but there was just a couple that I talked to that had that. But the big businesses like Boeing and medical centers and things like that, they just keep paying. They want their people there, and they want quality people.
I'm looking at the clock, and I want to get to a vote on this at some point, but we have hands up by Carol and Alderwoman Pindell Charles. Carol,
And John.
John's had his time in the sun.
Well, then take your hand down.
I do have one more comment that I'll make it briefly. It has to do with David's comment about fiscal transparency, and it has to do with the Hillman Garage. And I think the city council should consider carefully why we would invest in alternate forms of transportation that are both redundant and confusing, when in fact we could make that investment in the system we have today. And I feel very strongly that we should have a good, solid transit system and not 13 different systems.
Well, I think I need to interject and explain that that is being the system, the alternate systems that are being used while Hillman is down is being brought to us by VIA, which is one of the companies under ARPA, which is the consortium that is this private-public partnership. That they're doing that at their cost, the mobility, which includes the only thing that we're doing is increasing the ridership or the loop of the circulator, but they're doing the alternate shuttles and the on-call system. At least
I haven't run the numbers, but I think increasing the extra circulator could probably pay for the shortfall right there alone.
Yeah, I just wanted to make
and
sure
secondly, the fact that VIA's got something else to do under contract with the Hillman should be the subject of a discussion with the Hillman master contractors. What's the right thing to do for the city? And so we're pushing this forward rather quickly because we think that dialogue should happen.
Okay. Carol, last chance. Do you have anything to say?
I do. I want to
right.
echo Zoe's comment about what great work this is. And I find it very promising for the future. But I also heard David, things are in real time right now, and the city is facing an enormous shift with what's happening at the Hillman Garage. And I perceive that this kind of contradiction that exists right now between the wonderful plan that we have here and the reality that is on the table to take care of people with established patterns of communication and transportation and transit, to take care of them while this transition is going on is of primary importance to the city and the city government. And so I understand why there probably won't be an instant response to what is obviously a very good recommendation and report that we are presenting tonight. The second message I'm taking along with what David is saying is that we are in the situation we are in right now with buses and with parking and with cars to a considerable extent because there is a long history of lobbying in this town for residential parking. So I would urge us not to weigh in too heavily at this point on what we could do in terms of changing residential parking in order to facilitate free fare. My third point is a more humorous one. John, as a rider of the circulator, a fellow rider, I see this long-range plan as something that would be sort of like a whole system of circulators. You can take a bus anywhere, anytime. Here comes a bus. I think I'll find out if it's going to end up where I want to go. And so I'm very enthusiastic about the plan as a whole. I'm just cautious about how quickly it can be moved through a system that, as I say, is now going through an enormous transition.
Thank you, Carol. Alderwoman Pindell Charles, your hand is up.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Going back to the fiscal smartness of this, one thing I want to mention I guess we go back to possibly not necessarily a survey, but just a gathering of information from our area businesses. And I mean, being frank about it, normally our business community are Republicans. And so I don't know if it would behoove us to maybe take a look and speak with some of our businesses as far as looking at their employees and how this would be helpful. And the other thing, just one other thing I want to bring up, when it comes to Ward 3, and it's a very different demographic than most wards, I would venture to say that my ward would benefit greatly by what you have proposed here. I have quite a few bus riders, from what I can see, walkers, those who are trying to get to the grocery stores, the laundromat, carrying lots of groceries and bags and all. I think just from a practical standpoint, Ward 3 would definitely benefit from what you have provided here today. Not disregarding Ward 1 or downtown and what's going to be happening there when it comes to the Hillman Garage and City Dock, but when it comes to wards further out, and I can only at this point speak for Ward 3, I think it would be very beneficial. But we might want to take a look and ask businesses who are their employees and how they think that would benefit. That might tenor a bit of what we're talking about when it comes to fiscally smart and the persons that we might get some pushback from. So
Thank you, Rhonda. Elvia Thompson has a hand up. Did you have something, Elvia?
Yeah, just one thing, and that this plan is going to need a big public relations push
Oh, we know that.
to make it work.
Yeah.
We know that.
Yeah, and it's going to need some help from, in addition to the city's public information office. If that's.
We know that.
Okay.
We
Yes.
also know that we would like to have social service agencies push it, because it's beneficial to everybody that partakes of these agencies and everything. So there's a lot that needs to happen. We just needed to do the initial, and we need to get your vote, and then we can move forward with.
Oh,
what else
Elvia, Ellie, did you have something?
Yeah, two things. First, Carol said it exactly right. That is exactly what's happening as far as the city being focused. And she said it superbly. But I have an idea. It's sort of an out of the box idea, and maybe my colleagues can give this some traction. Okay, here it goes. Hopefully it's not too complicated. We lifted recovery zones, and there's two different kinds of outside dining. There's one where, like the Boatyard Bar and Grill, for example, took up their parking spaces. Forward Brewing took up their parking spaces on their lot. Bread and Butter took up their parking spaces. We want to reintroduce those, and the dilemma with those is how do they pay for them? And what the mayor was thinking about was similar to street parking. They could pay into some kind of a transit fund for those parking spaces that they promised the city in their certificate of occupancy, but now they're taking up with the seating. Have I lost anybody? What would be creative is if we could earmark those funds into this. That's something that, speaks to the way Gavin thinks, like, okay, let's give back those recovery zones in those parking lots. And there's some in Rob's ward and others in other wards, and get that money and earmark it for a free transit system. And that's just an out of the box idea.
You just added another item to our list of options. That's good. Great. I hope the time being what it is, I think it's time to move to a motion to approve, if anybody has such a motion.
I agree with Ellie.
Beth?
Oh, sorry. I thought we were going to get the okay first. Okay, we're going to make a motion. The motion is that the Annapolis Transportation Board approves the fare free. Sorry, we've had trouble with this one. fare-free transit initiative as described in the white paper and companion briefing presented this evening. The board further requests the City Council to take up consideration of this important initiative as it promotes social equity, reduces barriers to employment, and will improve downtown transportation/traffic in light of the loss of parking capacity resulting from the imminent demolition of the Hillman Garage.
Is there a
I'll
second?
second that.
Okay, so
Question
Beth,
about the motion?
Beth, I'm sorry, for purposes of taking minutes, can you text
I can
that to me
send
or
that to you.
something? Can you?
I can
text-
send it to you.
Okay.
All right, discussion?
Yes, question about the motion. Does it reflect the edit that I suggested? Is that included in the motion?
It is not. No, we were trying to just keep it brief. There's really a lot of stuff that we've talked about that we want to do that is part of this whole thing, but we wanted to keep it as general as possible, but hit the high points. So no, it's not there.
Will you consider modifying the motion to reflect it?
Yeah,
Sure.
if you have a proposal for an amendment, please make it.
It's what I said earlier.
All right.
Okay, say
Or-
it again. I didn't take it down.
There's
David.
adding the bullet with clear and consistent financial reporting and disclosure.
Okay.
Okay.
So that will be added to the motion that we are about to vote on.
Well, technically, that's not how to do it. Technically, you have to vote on the amendment first.
Right.
Yes. Yeah, well, I'm saying that the effect of voting for the amendment would
So-
be
Okay.
to add it to the.
So I make a motion in favor of the amendment.
Okay.
So I need to get the
state it-
amendment straight.
Yes, state it again, please. I'm writing it down, so.
I'm actually going to present the motion so that at least we can all see what we're talking about. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, that was the original motion, I think, that you had, Beth, right?
Yes, yep.
So David, what is the proposed change?
It's on the slide with, if I could see the slides again.
Well.
Can't you
I
just
don't-
say it?
Are
yeah, I
you
can't-
talking about amending the slide or amending the motion?
I'm talking about amending, I'm adding a bullet
Okay.
to
Well,
one
that's-
of the,
Would it do just as well? Can we accommodate you by simply adding your thought to the motion that we are about to vote on?
all right, then. But I'm assuming all right, then the way I would edit this particular motion would be right where the cursor is, and companion briefing presented this evening with the addition of a bullet reflecting the desirability of clear and consistent and transparent financial reporting.
How's that? Is that what you're
Very
looking
good.
for?
That's what I'm looking for.
Okay, so you need to make a motion to make that change.
I make a motion in favor of this change
No,
as
I
displayed on the
second.
screen.
Can we vote on the motion? On the amendment? All in favor, say aye.
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 Oh. How many was that again? Elvia is counting these things.
Do you want our hands up? That'll be easier.
Hands, I think, are easier. I'm just seeing two hands, three hands.
Well, I think you got to count the two virtual hands, David and Elvia.
Okay, Elvia. Okay.
Elvia.
Okay, that does it then.
Okay, so that's adopted, Kurt?
That's adopted. Now
Okay.
we get to vote on the motion in toto.
Has there been a second of the original motion?
Yes.
Okay, I vote aye.
All in favor, raise a hand or say aye. Aye. That appears to be,
7. That's what I see.
5, 6, 7. I have 8.
Zoe,
got-
did you vote?
Yeah, 8. Okay.
I'm actually a non-voting member by the, according to the charter.
Seriously, now that's news to the chairman.
Yeah, that's news to me too.
I think that's what it is. So yeah.
That's interesting because they vote you. The Academy rep is always voted, as does the St. John's rep.
Yeah,
Which
we've had
don't
this
have.
discussion before, and I'm gonna abstain on this when we have the votes to carry it, but I do need to check with the council on that because I
Okay.
believe it says that, but then the case is that we haven't always adhered to that.
Yeah, my most recent reading of the ordinance has you as a fully fledged member, but you can abstain if you like. And I judge the motion to have carried. It is adopted. And thank you very much for your participation, for your thoughts and your votes. This has, I'm delighted that we are making progress. Many of us, when we entered onto this enterprise of the Annapolis Transportation Board, wanted to make it an action-oriented board rather than merely a discussion session, as some of these boards and commissions tend to be. And I'm delighted that we are doing that. I'm here because I want things to change for the better, and I feel as though I'm in the company of people who feel the same way.
Could I ask who was the note taker today so I can send this to them?
Elvia?
Thank you.
Oh, you're going to send the motion to her, John?
Yep, the amended motion.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And I'll copy you, Beth.
Thank you.
All right. Alderwoman O'Neill, welcome again. And I wondered if you had any remarks you would like to make.
Thank you very much. And thanks for the moment to get an idea of who's on the transportation board and the work that you're setting out to do. I appreciate that. I am very excited about working on this committee because of the transportation issues that I see in Annapolis and some of the things that we can fix. I'm counting walking as transportation as well. And so there's a lot of sidewalks in Ward 2 that I'm hoping to get put forward. But I think that this is a really great group effort and workload that you all have done in creating this white page and working towards getting the city to fall in line with it. As a person who packs a lot of boxes on Fridays and delivers them all over to the city for people that can't drive to pick up food boxes, I hear all the time how bus transportation would be better if it was no fare and people could get to work. So if we can find a way to do that, I really think it'll benefit a lot of the people in the city that either just don't have the opportunity to get on a bus. I do think that we need to look at the routes and where the buses take them and where the pickups and whatnot are currently and where they can be adjusted and changed for the benefit of the most. But I do appreciate your time tonight, and I've loved listening to everybody's ideas and thoughts on this project, and I'm looking forward to help moving it forward with the council.
Great, thanks so much.
One of the things that you said about the routes, one of the things we've talked about a lot is redoing the routes and making sure that the routes go into the communities that need to have the bus service. So we know that, but we just decided not to complicate what we were doing at this time with adding the routes in, although we know that's a very important aspect of the system. And it is something that many of these other systems have done as well, to include Alexandria. When they just went fare free, one of the things they did is they went out and did a big survey, and they changed their bus routes and added buses out into other areas that hadn't been serviced before.
The list
So-
of things that we can do to make
Yeah.
transit better in Annapolis is quite long, and we're looking forward to tackling some of these other things in the future. But we bit our tongue and tried to confine ourselves to something simple and digestible, and that's what we did tonight. But we will be moving on to those things that you mentioned. Thank you. Could we go quickly around the table for any additional comments? This being the holiday season, my hope was that we could be fairly efficient and finish. But let's go quickly around the table. Tara Ashmore, do you have anything you'd like to say?
I do not, but thank you, and thank you for welcoming me, and I look forward to working with all of you.
You betcha. Tom?
Nothing to add, thanks.
Elvia?
No, this was good.
Charles Brooks is not with us tonight, is that correct? I think that's right. Kara?
Nothing to add. Was very glad to vote for this evening.
Great, thank you. Carol? Not.
I
Isn't
think
David
you're on
next?
mute, Carol.
I think you
Carol?
missed David.
Thank you,
Oh,
sorry.
David, you're right. David.
May I go ahead?
Yes,
I
go
just have
ahead.
a couple of quick things. I have discovered in conversation that my seemingly far-fetched idea of the development of a ferry system in the area, including Annapolis, is not so far-fetched. In fact, the county executive and the mayor are talking about a ferry coming out of Holly Beach already. So I'm much encouraged. The other thing that's more specific and that I bring to the board, I listened to the Planning Commission meeting the other night about Providence Point and was fascinated by both the positive things that are already in place regarding transportation and the potential for wide-ranging changes to transit along Forest Drive that will be the result of this project as it moves forward. So I spoke to Eric Wyszynski about it quickly because I was so caught up with the prospects. And Eric has been is willing to come give us more detail about what's happening at Providence Point and with Forest Drive at our next meeting in January. And I encourage us to welcome him.
Thank you. David?
Yeah, one thing real quick, to Rhonda, to your point about the business community here, one thing that might be interesting is if we could connect some of the business owners here in town with some of the business owners in places that have done this, like Park City, Utah. You're right, business people listen to other business people, and if business people there say, this was great, that would maybe go a long way to bringing them along with this. I don't know if there's a way to, the people who joined us either last meeting or the meeting before from that area, you know, if they could connect us with some of the business folks there.
One of the business people runs the same business in Park City and on Main Street in Annapolis.
Well, there you go.
Alpaca.
Alpaca.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. Cool. Then one other thing real
And
quick.
she's a big enthusiast. She gets lots
yeah.
of business that arrives by bus.
Yeah. So she might be a resource then. And then one other thing real quick, I encourage everybody to visit a website called City Observatory. If you just Google City Observatory, the author is a guy named Joe Courtwright, and he has a group called CEOs for Cities. He has an excellent piece on an absolute disaster of a highway project from a financial standpoint, where Kentucky and Ohio decided it was monumentally important to add capacity, highway capacity across the Ohio River. Together, they spent over $1 billion on a pair of 6-lane bridges. And they imposed a single-use toll of $2 to cross the bridge, and that commuters could cross for $1 a trip. They had to purchase a multiple thing, a multi-pass concept. They got TIFIA loans for the project, and they made inflated projections about usage. And Joe has actual traffic cam video of at rush hour how hardly anybody is using this bridge. As a result, the toll revenue will never pay off the debt. And Kentucky just had to refinance their share and add a decade to the repayment plan. And this is what passes for smart transportation policy in our country. Yep. I think it's, you may say, well, what does that have to do with things here? Well, this is a prime example of if you want to see fiscal insanity, check out what some of our states are doing in terms of pointless road expansions.
Thanks. Vince Harriman is not
Thank
here.
you, David.
John Purnell.
I don't have anything else. I've had my moment in the sun.
Beth.
No.
And Zoe.
I have an update. So the King George Street Route 450 bike path work group had a very productive meeting a couple weeks ago, and it sounds like the state has some funds that they can match the county's funds to move the project, at least two of the alternatives that we need to select as a work group with the Navy's decision to the next phase of preliminary design. So that will be a big step forward in terms of the Navy understanding the impacts on our property and sort of the configuration of that bike path. And it's a combination. There are different alternatives that have been laid out already through the feasibility study about doing a shared use path or an expanded sidewalks and some in-road bike paths. There's a number of different combinations. So the Navy will be reviewing the 5 alternatives that have already been assessed and selecting at least 2 of those that we're going to put forward to support in terms of moving that project to the next phase.
Good.
So
Good.
it's a
That's
small
good
step,
news.
but it's definitely a long planning process to do a bike path on Navy property. But we are, we continue to support that project and in coordination with our partners.
I promise I will be a frequent user myself.
Is that bike path open to the public, Zoe? Intended to be open to the public?
Yes.
As it would be on our existing sidewalks. So the existing sidewalks along King George and Route 450 are all on Navy property. They're outside the state road right away. So we would be replacing those sidewalks with either a shared use path or a bike path.
Okay. Thanks so much. Kwaku, do you have anything additional to report?
Yes. One is that the director's position has been re-advertised. So if you know people who may be interested, they may go to the city website to put in an application. The other thing is that I did hear about redesigning our routes to go to those communities that may need transit services or the bus service. I would like to refer some of the members to our transit development plan, which actually does that every 5 years. We do detailed socioeconomic analysis to determine what we call the transit needs. So based upon that, we will redesign the route. And the major one we did was about 10 years ago. Those who have been here for quite a while are where most of the buses were stopping on Spar Road, and then almost everybody was forced to transfer. As a result of that kind of study, that was changed to the current system. And one is the FYI item. I think I did hear John about the grants. City of Annapolis is not a direct recipient of federal operating grants. Everything we get is from state, and whatever the state rules are,
These
It's
are
whatever
pass-through
that-
funds. Some of them are passed through the state from federal sources.
Yeah, so the state has a lot of leeway in this. John, I can share with you the latest grant applications and take a look at the rules. So that is what we abide with. So that is why we have differences in opinion. Other than that, I think I owe the board the monthly report. I do have the October one done. I will be finishing the November one, so I will send both of you to the chair for further distribution to the members. That's what that I have, unless anybody has a question for me.
Thank you so much for those items.
We
I
did
think-
receive money in 2018, but I don't see it in later years. So maybe you're right there, Kwaku.
Yeah, it's normally the federal dollars are capital grants.
This was a preventative maintenance grant.
Oh yeah, that is also a capital grant that we are allowed to use as operating grant. That is probably the only exception.
But that's a federal grant, right?
Now, no, it's state. That's what it shows.
It's listed in Jody's report as federal, but we'll work that out. That's what
Yeah,
we're here
you
for.
work that out because I will tell you one time we were audited because what the finance has entered in the books showed that they were all federal dollars, but they were state dollars per the grant agreement. So I can share with you whatever that I have.
It's a really small slice anyway. So well, I'd like to get it worked out just so we line things up, but thanks.
Ellie?
Exactly.
Yeah, Kurt, just very quickly, two things. In reading the motion again, I just want to make sure that if we're not successful in dovetailing it to the Hillman thing, don't let that be the end of this. I mean, this, do
Oh,
you know what
it's
I'm
not going
saying?
to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
And the
you're- We will
right.
be a constant irritant. You can
Right,
count on that.
right. It's a way the motion is written. There's a lot of emphasis on Hillman, but let's look beyond that. And the
Yes.
second thing is there is an RFP out for the bike sharing and scooters
And
together.
e-bikes, yeah, right.
Yeah, there's a
Saw that,
funny
read
term.
that.
There's a funny term for it that kind of confused Beth and myself, but
Micro mobility
yeah.
Yes, micro mobility.
confused
We
me,
did
that's
have
for
a
sure.
discussion.
So
Yeah, we've read it. I didn't attend the pre-bid, but I don't think it affects fare free too directly.
Oh God, no. I just wanted, that was just an FYI.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks,
you.
everybody. I think we've come to the end. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Oh my God, yes.
Oh, he's got to get back to that cocktail
Let's
party.
debate this,
Yeah.
John.
No!
Okay. All in favor?
Wait, who seconded? Who seconded?
He's seconded. Who's the second?
Me,
Me, Beth. Okay.
All in favor?
whoever.
It appears to carry. Thank you, everybody.
Happy holidays,
Happy
everybody.
holidays.
Happy
Good
holidays.
night.
Merry Christmas, happy
Bye.
holidays.
Thank
Bye.
Bye-bye.